Have you ever wondered if you're really walking with God or if you're just going through the motions? That question is actually at the heart of the book of First John and why I'm so excited about this new Bible study. Hi, I'm Sandy from the creatorsclassroom.com, Growing in Joy Women's Bible Study Group, She Finds Hope, and Christian Women Loving Bible Study, all on Facebook. If this is the first time that you've done a study with me, I always have a downloadable PDF that is very helpful, and the study is also online. But you can get the link for the PDF in the comments. This week, we're taking an important step forward in our study of First John. Up until now, we've stayed mostly in observation, looking at what the text says, how it's structured, and what John emphasizes. This week, we begin interpretation, which asks the question, what does it mean? And in First John, he helps us interpret by using clear contrasts, setting spiritual realities side by side so we can understand what walking with God actually looks like. Over the next 5 days, we're going to walk through several of those contrasts and let Scripture explain Scripture. On day 11, we begin with the contrast of light and darkness. You'll read in 1 John 1, 5 through 7 and 1 John 2, 7 through 11. John tells us plainly that God is light and in him there is no darkness at all. That tells us something about God's nature before it tells us anything about ourselves. As part of the interpretation, you'll use a dictionary to look up light and darkness and how they're defined. This helps ground our understanding in something familiar before moving into spiritual meaning. You'll also be asked to consider how important physical light is in your own life, how it affects your safety, your work, your mood, and even your sense of direction. John isn't using light as a vague metaphor. He's using something concrete to help us understand spiritual reality. On day 12, we stay with light and darkness, but we take it a little deeper. You'll read John 1:5, not 1 John, but the main book of John in the Gospels, where we see that Jesus is the source of spiritual light, the light that shines in the darkness and cannot be overcome. You'll again consider physical light, specifically the sun, and how essential it is to life on this planet. Without it, nothing grows. Life simply cannot exist. Then you'll return to 1 John and see how John applies this truth spiritually. He shows us what life looks like with God's light and what life looks like without it. Interpretation here helps us see that walking in the light isn't about perfection. It's about direction, honesty, and relationship with God. On day 13, we shift to another contrast in 1 John, truth versus lies. John speaks often about truth not just as information, but as a way of life. As you read the assigned passages, you'll make two lists, one describing what Scripture says about living in falsehood or lies, and one describing what it says about living in the truth. This helps interpretation by letting Scripture define both sides of the contrast. Instead of guessing what truth looks like, you'll see how John describes it through words, actions, and attitudes. Day 14 focuses on another contrast, righteousness versus sin, which can be one of the most misunderstood contrasts in 1 John. As you read, you're asked to pay special attention to the words practices and making a practice. This is key for interpretation. John is not teaching sinless perfection. He is describing a pattern, a direction, a way of life. Interpretation helps us understand the difference between struggling with sin, which we all do, and living comfortably with it. John's focus is not fear, rather, it's clarity. On day 5, we look at another contrast, love of the Father versus love of the world, reading 1 John 2:15 through 17. You're asked to slow down, especially in verse 16, because John clearly defines what he means by loving the world. He's not talking about enjoying God's creation. He's talking about misplaced desires, priorities, and sources of fulfillment. Interpretation here helps us see that John is addressing the heart, what we chase, what we depend on, and what ultimately shapes our choices. We've been doing interpretation all this week, and it helps us bridge the gap between observation and application. We're not rushing to ask, what should I do? We first are asking, what is God showing me about himself, about truth, and about the Christian life? John uses contrast to bring clarity, not condemnation. These contrasts help us understand what walking with God looks like in real, everyday life. Next week, we'll move into application, where we ask how these truths shape the way we live, love, and walk with God. I hope you'll join us. And I ask you to do all the things that we do in social media, like, subscribe, and share. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.